Hi everyone, and welcome to my next video tutorial, which will be focused on launching an EC2 instance. Now, an EC2 instance is essentially a virtual server which we can provision utilizing the EC2 service in AWS, also known as Elastic Compute Cloud. So let's go ahead and generate our first EC2 instance. So we can search for EC2. So I'm just going to put an EC, and you can also put an EC2. So what happens here is AWS auto completes and searches for the service based on the name you put. So I'm going to click here on EC2, and this will help us to generate virtual servers in the cloud. So let's just be patient here. So as you can see here, we have our resources dashboard here, and you can just refresh it here to see all of the latest information. So we want to click on instances running. We have 0, but let's go ahead and click on that. And you want to launch your very first EC2 instance. So we can click on launch instances. Okay, after which it's going to take us through a setup wizard, which I'll explain for you. As we complete this setup wizard here on the left, it's going to ensure that our summary here matches what we have set up. So let's start off with our web server name. So I'm going to call it my web server. You can give it any name that you desire. It's really up to you. This will be the name to which we can identify our EC2 instance with. So my web server. Then we can scroll down and choose a base OS image / AMI Amazon machine image here. So this is essentially a template that contains the software configuration for our operating system, app server, and applications to launch our instance. So we're going to keep it simple and use the quick start. Now we're going to use the Amazon Linux AMI. So this is specifically going to be used since it's in the free tier eligible. If you have experience with EC2 and AMIs, you can of course choose a different one such as Ubuntu, Red Hat, macOS, etc. We can just confirm here that the architecture will be via 64-bit x86, and we're going to use an Amazon Linux 2023 AMI. Great, so let's scroll down now under instance type. So we're going to use the T2 micro instance type, which is on the free tier eligible. So this is essentially the size of our virtual server. In other words, EC2 instance. So you can go ahead and click on this drop down and select another instance type if you so desire. So T2 small, T2 medium, or large, etc. But do keep in mind it is going to cost you more money. In this case, with the free tier eligible for T2 micro, we're going to have one vCPU, virtual CPU, and 1 gig of memory. Very small, very simple. So let's just keep it easy as is. Now you need to unfortunately create a key pair login. So this key pair login you can use to securely connect to your instance, and this will ensure that we have access to that particular EC2 instance. Now we're not going to go into detail here with using key pairs. So essentially key pairs we can use to SSH into our EC2 instance, and SSH is quite another topic, but it's mandatory to create a key pair to do so. So you can say create new key pair, and you can give a key pair name. So I'm going to call this my EC2 KP for key pair. So we can then scroll down and you can choose the file format. So if you want to use it with OpenSSH or with PuTTY, you can just decide which one you would prefer. Once you're happy with that, you can say create key pair. Now we're not going to delve into this, okay? This is something out of scope, but it's just something that you're going to want to do. And I'd recommend just reading a bit further on key pairs and SSH. Next, we want to define our network settings. So on the default, we're going to use the default VPC. We're not going to set a preference for our subnet, and we want a public IP to be automatically assigned. This is enabled so that we can connect to our EC2 instance. Next, under firewall, we want to create a security group, and essentially a security group in AWS terms is our firewall. Essentially, we just call them security groups, and it's essentially a set of firewall rules that will control traffic with our EC2 instances, inbound traffic and outbound traffic. So we want to create a new security group, and it's going to be called Launch Wizard 1 on the default. And we want to allow SSH traffic from anywhere to connect to our instance. Now this is where that key pair comes in hand. So we're already allowing SSH traffic. So if we have our key pair connected accordingly, we can connect to our instance from a external source. We also want to allow HTTP traffic for now from the internet. So we're essentially setting up a HTTP endpoint so we can access our web server. So this is important so we can connect to our web server / EC2 instance. Under storage, we're going to have the default set, so 1 gig of GP3 root volume. You can change this if you desire, but do keep in mind it may cost you. After which, we want to click on Advanced Details here, and you can scroll down. And as you can see, there are a lot of constraints and configurations that you can configure. However, this is a little bit advanced and out of scope for just launching a simple EC2 instance. So I'd recommend that you just scroll to the bottom for now until you see user data. So this section here. So you can either upload a file with user data or enter it in. Now, this is essentially going to be the first page or web page that we actually see on our EC2 instance. So as soon as our EC2 instance is loaded up, we're going to see this once we access our public IPv4 address with a HTTP enabled. That's what we'll see on our first page. So I've configured some simple HTML here, which I'll pin as a comment for you below this video. And simply put, it's just an index.html file that is going to output a h1 tag that says hello world from the host. So very simple code here just to serve as a demonstration purpose that our EC2 instance is live and that we can see a simple web page is associated with it. So on the right, you can just confirm and check everything that you have set in your summary. If you're happy with everything, you can just say launch instance. Okay, so this is going to essentially go through steps such as creating a security group rules, and it's going to start the initiation process for our EC2 instance. Once that's been successful, you can click on instances. And if we refresh here, we can see we have one pending. So my web server, that's what we just created. It's currently in the pending state. We can close this info panel and we just want to refresh here until we see running. And essentially you can click here on any state on this drop down and you can just set it for running so that you only see your running instances. So if you refresh, you can see, okay, I have one EC2 instance running. Now we can see more information. We can see the name, of course, my web server. It has an instance ID. The state, it's in the running state. The instance type or the virtual server size, you could say, is the T2 micro instance. The status check is underway and our availability zone is in US East 2C. Now this will be random based on EC2's preference. Now before we can actually connect to this web server with our IPv4 address that we have set up with HTTP, we need to wait for the status checks to be completed. Usually 2 out of 2 need to be passed. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wait for the status checks to be completed and then I'll show you the next set of steps. So I'd recommend that you also wait as we wait for these status checks to be completed. All right, so welcome back. So as you can see, our status checks have now passed. If you don't see this, you can just refresh after a certain amount of time, and you should see that 2 out of 2 status checks have been passed. Perfect, so now we have our working EC2 instance all configured and ready to go. So let's test it out. So you can just click here on the checkbox on the left-hand side. And if you scroll down here, you'll see that we have a public IPv4 address. So this is why earlier in the configuration, we had enable public IPv4 addresses set to enable an auto-assigned IP. So what you can do is you can copy this here by clicking on the icon. And in any tab, you can just paste in the following. So that number, that is our public IPv4 address. And as you can see now, we have hello world from IP, etc., etc. And that is essentially going to be the private IPv4 address that we can see here. But the general understanding here is that we're able to connect to our web server / EC2 instance with our public IPv4 address here that has been stipulated in the configuration. So we can refresh and we can see that this is set. All right, so that is how you can essentially go on ahead and launch your very first EC2 instance. Now you're probably wondering, how can I delete this now? So I know how to do this. So what we can do is make sure that you've clicked on the checkbox here to select your EC2 instance that you want to delete. And you would go to instance state. And then you would go to terminate instance. So you can go ahead and click on terminate instance. Okay, just confirm that it's going to be terminated. So you can just say terminate. and we can see it's been successfully terminated. And what's going to happen now, it's going to shut down. So this process will take a bit of time, and we can now see it's no longer in the running state. And if we go to terminated, we can see that this web server that we have just tested that was running is now in the shutting down state, and it will be deleted. Right guys, so that's it for this video tutorial. That's how you can launch your very first EC2 instance. All right, so that's it. Thank you for watching the video and for the support, and I'll see you next time.